Good evening, everyone. With a quorum of members present, I'll call the Committee of the Whole for Tuesday, July 9th, 2019 to order. We have only one item of business on our agenda for tonight, and you'll recall a couple weeks ago we had started this discussion. This is a little bit of a replay of that discussion. We were one member short of an acting quorum, so we had the discussion, but we did not take action or vote on the item. So tonight, now that we have almost our entire group with us, we can make a decision tonight and discuss this issue as a group. So the item on our agenda is discussion and possible action to modify the capital plan policy and related capital plan budget procedures, including the delegation of the ranking of CIP requests to a CIP committee. And if you had read the minutes of the session that we'd had before, this item comes to us because we now, going into this 2020 budget cycle, will be in our fifth year of a change that we made a few cycles ago, where we went away from a CIP committee. Prior to that, a CIP committee ranked all the requests, and then the final decisions were made by the council and the finance committee and incorporated into the budget. And so at one point, I want to say about 2014, we made a change and we reverted that ranking to the entire council to rank as a committee of the whole. And so now that we've got some experience with that process and its outcomes, we have the opportunity to decide now if we want to stay with that process, which forces all 11 members to rank, or if we want to go back to a CIP committee structure where a defined committee would take the facility tours that are necessary, receive all of the requests and presentations from the department, rank and score the projects, analyze at what point the funding projected for the year would run out, and then take their recommended results back to a committee of the whole, where we would then vet that here and make those final decisions. So we would still, as a committee of the whole, be able to move projects above and below the line and make sure things that need funding can still get funding. But the minutia of the ranking process, sitting through the presentations and getting all of that scheduled for everyone, which from a scheduling standpoint every year has been a little bit like herding cats. It's hard to get the presentations and all of us together for that. And at least half the council at one point or another has complained about the process being either arduous, complex, awkward in some cases, to get all 11 of us to determine what the true needs of the departments are when we don't work in the departments enough to truly know. So we are dependent upon a 10-minute presentation and a little bit of question and answer with the department head, and then we make decisions and we score projects that affect them year-round. And so also, we've had some difficulty with getting all of the ranking sheets back in a timely manner, so when we release the ranking in summary, we don't always have 11 districts' worksheets. So our results are sometimes reflective of 7 or 8, not 11, district ranking sets. So with that, the discussion that we had in our last meeting was whether or not we're interested in delegating that process back to a CIP committee. And that CIP committee, under its old makeup, consisted of the finance director, the director of public works, the city planner, and then 3 elected officials. It had the chairman of the SISM committee, capital improvements and street maintenance for the infrastructure focus, the chairman of the finance committee for the budget planning end of things, and the council president. When the council president is also the chairman of either of those committees, in the past we had brought the vice chairman up, so that we had some balance and we still had 3 different people doing the rankings, so that no one of us would operate in 2 voting sets. The rationale behind that makeup originally was that the finance director was on hand to score based on the fund sources and alternate fund sources that are available to fund projects with. The public works director is an engineer who's often involved with everyone else's projects, including facilities and infrastructure work. And the city planner was on board to make sure that the projects that we were selecting were in tune with the city's comprehensive plan and goals. And so with that insight, we had a blended result between staff and elected officials that yielded positive results. It seems that our results at the end of the project were no better or worse with all of us doing it than it was with a subcommittee doing it and then referring their recommendations to a committee of the whole that still maintained control of the end product. So what I'd like to do is get some opinion from you guys as far as how you feel about a CIP committee, and if you think that would streamline things and help us out a little bit. Tom?
Well, I appreciate the the thought, and I probably support it to a degree. It's always seemed to me that it has been kind of awkward at times, you know, the scoring matrix. You have almost like some of them require like a positive, negative response or something, you know? It's like, am I supposed to say yes or no here? Like, is it 0 or 5 or 2
10,
point? Yeah.
yeah.
So that is a little weird, but I did appreciate the hands-on aspect of it, though, knowing that it's arduous and it's kind of a pain and whatnot, and I would hope everybody's doing it, because if there's something in my district that I feel particularly, you know, interested in, passionate about, I'm going to score that sucker, you know. The CIP committee doesn't seem to include anybody like from like the chair of the Parks committee, which, you know, there are park-related things that come up that, you know, like the Stewart Park pillars, you know, which I'm glad that we found funding for. But, you know, that was kind of a push to get that to happen. And, you know, and the Parks chair might, you know, feel that there are things there that others might not see as being high priority, but he might, you know, so. And, yeah, he could bring it up in the subsequent cow, but didn't really have a scoring
The
opportunity.
department directors would still all participate in the presentations. They'd still make the presentation. In connection with the CIP materials, they do score their own projects as far as high, medium, and low priority, so that we know within their submissions which ones they need most.
Right.
The mayor did bring this up in his last staff meeting where all the department heads were present, and none of them voiced a concern that they felt under or unrepresented with Eric, Marianne, and Brad sitting in those capacities, partially because the Public Works Director is involved in most park projects that are developing infrastructure or redoing things. So we felt that the results from a scoring matrix, if we hold them against the comprehensive plan, we'd still get an objective result, but then we, as a committee of the whole, still retaining control of that, what's above and what's below that line, and getting that final review, you know, and the chance to adjust that slightly if necessary. I think we do still want to retain that control, where the buck still stops with us, but the minutia of the process to be delegated out seemed to make sense.
You know, as we've seen in the past, sometimes something might turn into a phased project rather than an everything. So we might look at, well, there's where we're going to gain some monies that could be applied to something below the line, and that can all occur in the cow. Just so that the spirit of this is when it goes to the cow, it's not like, here's our recommendations, you know, and we've got it all figured out now, because, you know, we can still look at it.
One part of the discussion that we had in the lead-up to this in the mayor's staff meeting was that the CIP committee approach, even for the presentations, when you have that joint makeup between staff representation and elected officials, where not everyone scoring is an elected official, it does feel like a more collaborative process and a more collaborative result, where the process that we had playing out with CIP before, where we would be up here and we bring up the department head to the podium to present with or without visual aids, and then we do some question and answer with them, that really relegates them not only to just an advisory role, but just the dynamic of it feels less collaborative. It kind of feels and looks like court, where, you know, here they are presenting and they're, you know, asking the 11 of us to understand the needs of an entire department in, you know, the equivalent of an elevator speech, and then hope that we make the right choice and understand it all with or without a tour. I mean, sometimes the way our meetings had been structured before in the evening, it's difficult to take a facilities tour because at night a lot of our facilities are closed. So, you know, a lot of times too now, if the CIP committee needed to take a tour, they would do it during the workday when people are already working, and there's less people to schedule to try and get that accomplished. Anyone else have thoughts? Mr. Mayor, and then Mary.
Thank you, and as usual, you stole a lot of my thunder, but that's okay.
I try not to.
I know, that's all right, but in bringing this forward, this is the way it used to be a number of years ago, and it did work out in a very good setting. I guess I'm looking at it not to be so tedious for everybody, because let's face it, sometimes it's very hard for council members to take that ranking as far as whatever project is needed and then make a determination that way. I just think it's a little bit easier this way, maybe not as cumbersome, that type of thing. So that's why we brought it back for review for all of you.
Mary.
Sounds good.
Thank you, Lisa. So first of all, I want to share that I think either opportunity would work well for me. I just want to share some thoughts with all of you. I think that as council members or elder persons, we all have that fiduciary responsibility to understand how we are making decisions with taxpayers' dollars. I took a look at first-class cities and second-class cities, those that are greater than 150,000 in population, to kind of do some research to see what larger cities are doing, which, I can bring back and share with all of you. And then I took a look at those who are a little bit larger than Wausau, and then those that were similar size in Wausau. What I've learned in my research is that annually, there are budget retreats. I know that we have a retreat coming up in mid-July here. I'm not sure what the agenda entails. I hope to see something shortly or soon. After my 1 year in as an elder person, I've learned a lot. I was one of those that did not turn in my CIP ranking because I was new. I didn't quite understand the process. I did get a really nice detailed email from Mary Ann. Sharing with me what council members have done in the past with ranking. And I asked questions about, well, do we have, strategic goals? What are some of our core objectives for the next couple of years? Mary Ann did share with me a link to a comprehensive plan, and she also gave me an attachment for a citizen survey that was conducted back in 2012. And so I went back and I looked at all that information, and the comprehensive plan the URL no longer works. And I started digging around and I said, okay, well, all these other cities, I looked at Eau Claire, Madison, and Stevens Point, and they all had a 5-year roadmap. And when they're going through their capital improvement process or request right now as well too. And they have a really strong timeline, a really great structure, very solid criteria where not only are we asked to just rank based on 1 through 10 or based on what the department heads have already ranked for their initiatives, there's actually a great pathway of how we evaluate the items that are being presented to us. I understand 200 pages is very tedious, cumbersome, it's a lot of work, but we do have that responsibility. And I just want to share some suggestions for all of us. If we decide to go the CIP committee route, I would ask that we take a look at looking at how we plan for the future, because this can help aid that CIP committee, or all of us, should it go back to what it is today, that it provides an aid and a model for us to be able to, to just really be able to rank everything according to the direction that we're trying to take the city and our community. I would like to take a look at that criteria selection again. I know that ranking 1 through 10, it makes it really hard for us, but if we have a good understanding of having a different measurement, maybe like a 1, 2, 3, it makes it a lot easier. 1 through 10 is a huge, long measurement. It makes it very hard for me to say, well, should this be an 8? Or should this be a 2? So it makes it really hard, even though department heads have already ranked, given their rationale, whether it's going to be a cost savings or whether it's keeping the lights on. I think it makes it a lot better for us if that is improved. And in my final thought here, I want to share that a budget retreat is very important to all of us. I hope that as we craft the agenda for the mid-July retreat for council members, I hope that we talk about the cost of government. I hope we understand the limitations of our finances today, and we understand debt services. I think that for myself, I can't speak for all of you, for myself, I want to be educated on, on where we are at. For example, how are we currently spending today, and how should we be spending? And those are things that we need to ask ourselves as we're going through these retreats. This should be a top agenda item for us. We need to talk about a way forward, action items for us for the next 3 to 5 years, if not 5, 3, if not 3, maybe the next couple of years. These are important discussions, and I hope that whatever we decide tonight, that I hope you take some of those recommendations and keep them in mind. Thank you.
Perfect. I would agree with you on that. I think strategic planning is of value, and I think that We do that with many of our plans. We do it with our comprehensive plan, we do it with our park and rec plan, we do it with our airport plan. And so, that said, to know what's on the horizon is always important so that we can plan for it, and the element of surprise isn't prevalent. I think we've done a good job of that, but I think there's always room for more of it, especially in budget planning. Our council retreat that's coming up on the 25th of July will be a goal-setting session for the council. We'll take a look at the goals that we set last year in May or June, and we'll see what progress we've made toward those and determine if we need to retool that list, if we've achieved some of those objectives, and then what issues we still want to work on in the remaining months of the term that we all have between now and April of 2020. And so budget planning, though, a budget planning retreat just to look at budget initiatives and, to perhaps train ourselves on those processes is also a good idea. And I think there's enough material there to have that be a separate session for us, where we just get together and talk about money and how we borrow and pay for things and what we buy with that money. So I certainly would be amenable to planning that. Our CIP gets underway in July. The budget isn't ratified until November, and in between there, the Finance Committee has all kinds of work to do, but I think before that even gets going, once we get through that first CIP, whichever way we do it, that would be a great time for us to have a budget planning session, because we'd be sitting with these recommendations for the capital end of things, and the cost to continue budget is still in development, and that's a good time for us to weigh those things and get that education. Having done the CIP, now this will be the 11th time. I've done it 5 times the old way, and I've done it 5 times the new way. The results seem similar every time. I think that from a scheduling and complexity standpoint, the CIP committee is easier. The last group of aldermen that ranked the old way was me and Gary Gisselman and Bill Nagel. We were the last team that did it. Bill as the finance chairman, I was the council president, and Gary was the SISM chairman. So I think we were the last 3. And then from that point, it became all of us. And so I think when that changed, a lot of people felt sucked into that process, and, somewhat, I guess, some were stressed by it because it was a lot of new activity. So, Pat, go ahead.
Thank you. I think they're good thoughts coming out here tonight, and I appreciate them. And I'm supporting this change, and I had concerns similar to Mr. Neal's about being able to press for certain things that are important to individual aldermen. But we will be free to attend any and all of these meetings. And we'll be able to, sit out there with our dog park and our Go
Yes.
Solar posters. So I think we'll be heard, and, it'd be ample time to lobby for our special things that maybe we see the value in, and maybe others haven't gotten there yet. So I think it's a good move, and we're not locked into it forever, but I would move to recommend to the full city council that we make this change.
Okay, and then we go return to a CIP committee. Okay, is there a second, Mr. Nutting? Was that a second? Further discussion or questions? Go ahead, Mary.
I don't know if this request will come from here, or I guess because I feel like I'm still new. Evaluating the ranking process, is that done from the Finance Committee, or does Mary Ann lead that effort? And I guess I should step back for a little bit. When was the last time we took a look at this process and made some changes from department heads?
As far as
before-
what the matrix looks like what the scoring basis?
Yeah.
2 years ago, the Finance Committee took a look at the sheets as far as what the scoring categories were and what the weighting values were, and they opted to stay with the matrix that they had. There were a couple of minor changes they made, but at its core, it's pretty much the same as it had been throughout. They're still ranking 1 through 10. There's some guidance on the sheet. If you score something 0 through 5 versus 6 through 10, within that range, you get a ton of leeway. And I think that's what Tom was talking about, where when a project is important to one district versus the others, or when a project is, more critical in one neighborhood than another, typically the representative from that area would max out the points, because you can then influence the average. And so with that leeway, I think that's why the scale was so large. But and by design, but, knowing that all 11 of us probably are not going to score the maximum on whatever that project is, there's some leveling there. But the Finance Committee could certainly look at it again and take a look at those categories and see if they want to make some adjustments. We did the same thing with room tax, but we had the Room Tax Commission do it. I think this process that we're veering toward is similar to what we do with block grant, where we have the evaluation done separately, but then we still have the ability to make adjustments and we maintain that final control. So at the end of the day, the buck will still stop with us. So
Okay, thank you.
we could do that, though. We can put that on a future finance agenda and give it another look.
And I can always
Attempt.
provide some
Absolutely.
ideas and
Yep.
suggestions. Thank you.
We would love that. Okay, with that, we have a motion and a second on the floor then to delegate the CIP rankings to a CIP committee. Further discussion or questions? Seeing none, members in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? None are opposed, that motion carries. That's the only item we have tonight, so a motion to adjourn would be appropriate. Motion by Herbst, second by Tao. Members in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. We'll stand adjourned, and then City Council will convene in this chamber at 6:30. Thanks, everybody.